So what other things have you found that attorneys sometimes can forget to consider as they're being faced with a potential settlement on a tractor-trailer crash case?
One problem that I think is a big problem is that tractor-trailer cases tend to have like cross-jurisdictional components. And what I mean by that is, usually these crashes are occurring on major highways. And so you have a plaintiff who's from a completely different jurisdiction. Say they're from South Carolina, they're traveling through Virginia, a truck from Wyoming crashes into them. And an attorney from South Carolina gets the case through the family, and they start working it up thinking, let me go ahead and see if I can resolve this case on behalf of the family, even though I'm not licensed to practice in Virginia, and I don't know Virginia law. There's a couple of problems that exist with that. Number one, the insurance company will oftentimes look at that attorney in their firm and say, not only is that attorney not licensed in Virginia, but no one in their firm is licensed in Virginia. And if they will really slow roll the resolution of that case and say, yeah, we want to resolve this. We want to do what we can to get this done. And they will slow it down so that the attorney's eventually facing a statute of limitations issue. If they're 4 months away from a statute expiring, they might be in a position where they panic and say, okay, we got to take what's on the table. That's one potential issue. And they may say that because they'd rather take what's on the table rather than, associate a Virginia firm or something like that. But the second problem that exists when you have an attorney from outside the state is that there's some very specific laws that we have, say, in Virginia. In one law, for instance, that freaks a lot of Virginia attorneys out, and certainly a lot of attorneys from other jurisdictions, is that we have what's called contributory negligence. And defense attorneys like to say, well, if the plaintiff is even 1% at fault in causing the crash that happened, even 1%, then they can't recover anything. And I don't think that that's actually a completely correct statement of the law, but nevertheless, there is somewhat prevailing view or an argument that it's the prevailing view that that's what the law is. And a lot of attorneys from other jurisdictions may say, oh, Virginia is a terrible place for these types of cases. Let's go ahead and settle this case for nuisance value so that this family can get something, as opposed to having the family file suit in Virginia, be in a position where they are spending tens of thousands of dollars, wasting a couple of years, and then at the end they get nothing, and it just adds to their burdens and their sorrows and everything else. It's important to understand that, like I was saying, the law that applies to trucks is different than the law that applies to vehicles. And so there are crashes in Virginia where you'd say that car driver is at fault. They contributed to this crash. It was slight, but it was enough to cause this crash. In Virginia, some of those laws can go out the window when you're talking about a truck crash. For example, in Virginia, if a truck driver acts with willful and wanton negligence, then contributory negligence is not a defense to the claim. And that is a nuance that a lot of Virginia attorneys don't know. And it just so happens that the case that sets that out from the Supreme Court of Virginia happens to be a truck crash where a passenger vehicle crashed into the back of a truck, which would seem to have no viability in Virginia, but it was actually one where the Supreme Court said, well, this truck driver didn't put out warning cones and didn't do all these things, and that amounts to willful and wanton negligence. And so an attorney, if they're going to be trying to resolve a case, they need to know not just the law of the jurisdiction where the crash happened, but they need to know all the different nuances and exceptions and everything else. It's a potential malpractice trap to think that you can advise your client on whether to accept a settlement if you don't know all the laws and the nuances that may apply. Because, again, the particular areas of law that would cause contributory negligence not to apply to a case in Virginia are extremely nuanced. And so that is a potential issue that I would think people have.